I love cookies. I love cookies. I love cookies. I love cookies.
Welcome to Cookies, the postseason, preseason, playoffs, and the very best basketball podcast. I am Ben Detrick. Jordan Redaelli is on vacation. Fortunately, picking up the slack, Andrew Kuo is here.
No Devin Booker, man. I pod for my country.
You are a true patriot.
That's right. Even though I shoot 3 for 11, 4 for 12, I'm there. All in life, all you have to be is present.
You represent for God and country, Mr. Kuo.
Against Turkey in overtime, that's for sure.
Pod and country. Well, yes, we are here mired in the depths of the NBA offseason, but there are a few interesting things to talk about. We've got Team USA. Mm-hmm. We've got various dramas around the league, I suppose, are still going on in Los Angeles and New York, maybe. I don't know.
Drama takes no break, man.
There's got to be some goss. There's got to be some tea. But yeah, so let's talk about what's happening in New York City right now. And we have the arrival of Fashion Week, your favorite time of year.
Oh, that's right. How's the Nightlife Batman feel about it? Is the Nightlife Batman still employed?
I will say this.
Active.
If the Nightlife Batman signal goes up, there's a chance I will arrive. But it's not guaranteed. One day in the past, it was guaranteed. Now, I don't know. The villains may just, overwhelm the bank vault. I don't know. I could show up. But, yeah, I think we'll see some NBA players, as usual, rolling into New York City for Fashion Week. Might get a James Harden sighting. Might get a PJ Tucker. The fashion horses, if you will, of the basketball circuit.
Is R.J. Barrett going to slide into his role as a fashion beacon in New York City?
Yes. He is walking in a show.
Is he? Which one?
I can't tell you, but he is.
Oh, nice.
It's that inside information that people tune in to Cookies for. A vague allusion to a rookie on the Knicks doing something fairly meaningless. But you got the inside track, friends.
Is he Virgil cool? Like, is he, I think he's a believable, fashion guy, sort of like Karis LeVert. But in what tier? Is he big name? Is he fringe? Is he cool? Is he established? All things I want to know. It turns out like he might not be as boomer as the Maple Mamba vibe we got on draft day, right?
Well, I did an interview with R.J. Barrett that should come out tomorrow in GQ, where we talk a little bit about style. So I'm not sure if you were trying to set me up to promote this article.
Come on, man. Pod and country. Let's go.
Small Q&A. But we talk a little bit about those things. And it's worth keeping in mind that he just turned 19 years old. So for an 18-year-old, newly 19-year-old to have a fully formed fashion aesthetic would be asking a lot.
Can you imagine that there's 19-year-olds starting point guards for the NBA who say shit like, I grew up on Travis Scott. I remember I was a kid when I first heard Young Thug. Like, fuck, man, time flies.
It's very wild, and we talked about that a little bit. And, if someone is 19 years old and just turned 19, they were, 12 years old when Kobe Bryant blew out his Achilles. Michael Jordan retired before they were born.
Lil Uzi Vert came out. SoundCloud, right? Like 5, 6, 7 years.
Yeah. So when a 19-year-old, when they show him a picture of the Fugees, and people are like, how do you not know who this guy is? It's like, man, they were born 3 years after the score dropped.
Right. How could you not know this is AC/DC and not Led Zeppelin? Like, I have no idea.
Right. It's like showing someone someone who's 40 years old stuff from 1975 and being like, you don't know who the biggest star in the country music circuit was in 1975? It's like, fuck no. So anyway, we talked a little bit about that, and I don't think he's as much of a boomer as we may have initially believed. He might just be Canadian.
This is music to my ears, man. Tell me more.
Well, let me not get ahead of anything. Let the interview will speak for itself. But again, Canadians have a certain sense of earnesty and kind of this, I don't know, it's a nod to sort of this East Coast aesthetic. And you see it in the past from their rappers who are very New Yorkish and from, pre-Drake, et cetera, like kind of about skills. And there's this idea that, I don't know, there's a purism to Canada that may make someone seem like a boomer, even if they aren't necessarily one.
This is an interesting idea for sure. It's like, it's the question of, right, do we look at the details too much? Like, if we simplify things, does it get easier or harder? Like,
right. Look, if you talk to a basketball player who's from Chicago, they are 99% of the time going to shout out Patrick Beverley as emblematic stylistically of the Chicago basketball player. That's just what they do. Like, Patrick Beverley, man, defense, we get on it. We're intense. We're scrappy. We don't back down. And whether or not that's true for all Chicago players, they will publicly embrace that image as sort of the civic representation of their basketball scene. And maybe in New York, it shifts a little bit. Like, uptown guys are known for being flashy. Guys from the Bronx or Brooklyn are known for being, more gritty. Guys in LA are like a little more finesse and flashy. And it's like, it may not even be true of particular players, but everyone subscribes to this idea.
Yeah, and like the line in the Canadian national anthem that always sticks out to me is like, "We stand on guard for thee." And I'm like, Like, if I was a Canadian, I'd just be like, okay, that's fair. We do, But do we have to spell it out like that? And RJ Barrett has come out this week and said all these cool things, being like, listen, I consider myself a playmaker. I can play 1, 2, or 3, whatever these guys need. I don't even need to shoot. And, that's a right thing to say, but it's kind of... my perception of him is changing a little bit because he seems kind of more relaxed and not like as locked in as I thought. Basically what he's saying is like, I'll go with the flow. Does he stand on guard for
Well, it's interesting because,
the Knicks?
Well, there's a tendency for athletes to say what they know people want to hear. And I think that applies certainly to a guy who is 18 or 19 years old, but also to veterans in the league. They're trying to get through an interview. They're trying not to say anything that's going to antagonize someone unless that's their personality and their goal. For the most part, guys are just trying to knock out the interview and keep their day going.
Always.
So when they say, oh man, New York City, Knicks, blue collar, defense first, playing in the Garden, like they're just going to run through the checklist of everything that people have previously told them that you're supposed to say about playing for the Knicks.
And every team. Like, you could say that about any single city and everyone would be like, true. We are blue collar. We do work hard. And we've talked about this, like. It's
just the Lakers. Like, shout out to the Lakers for being the only franchise where maybe Golden State, but the Lakers specifically are the only ones where no one says we're a blue collar team. Like, no, we're a white collar team.
I love it. And before we get into that, like the LA vibe. Yeah, it's great. I'm so grateful for all of that. But before we talk hoops, man, tell me your schedule for Fashion Week.
I will say the show I'm excited to see is Kalina Strada, and she's having a breakout season. I think that's going to be really exciting. And I don't know, that's one that I want to check out. It's next Sunday. That's one that I'm super interested in. Other than that, I don't think I'm really going to be, highfalutin around checking out shows and stuff. I might go to a party or two. There is one event that's going to be exceptionally exciting, though.
This sounds really, really interesting.
Yes. It's going to happen on Saturday from noon to 5, and it's a cookies pop-up.
What? Oh, my God. This is amazing. Why didn't you tell me about this?
I'm surprised this is the first time you're hearing about it. It's a cookies pop-up. that's going to transpire at Kinfolk on Wythe Avenue in Brooklyn on Saturday, the 8th, from noon to 5. And there's going to be new product drops, shirts, accessories, etc., plus a sample sale of some of our classics.
That's right.
What do you think about that, Kuo?
I'm very excited, man. We're going to have DJs. We're going to have drink specials. Basically, it's just going to be me and Ben and maybe Jordan if he's back from vacation hanging out. So we'd love for everyone to come through, and you don't even have to buy anything. I just want to hang out with some basketball heads and talk hoops, get ready for the season. But
Yeah,
12 to 5.
There is no pressure to purchase anything if you don't want to, but we're going to have some drink specials. We're going to be playing music, hanging out. So yes, Kinfolk this Saturday coming up from noon till 5 p.m. Come through and hang.
That's right. Man, I used to go to so many fashion things like when in my 20s. It used to be a thing. I used to have conflicts like I'm not to brag, but like there was all this fun stuff to do. And now that I'm older, I feel like all that fun stuff is so far away, and I'm looking at it like through binoculars, I'm like, what are all these people doing? And I just am so out of the loop.
Well, as elderly boomers, we just don't have the same capacity for like a fashion week, an art week, a Basel, etc. I mean, it used to be like a literal spreadsheet. We'd be like, okay, what are the parties tonight? Ooh, there's 4. I think we can make it to 3. Like, I'd never try to do that shit anymore.
Yeah, and also it's social media because I have a great time just looking through my feed and checking stuff out too. Back in the day, you just had to go.
But the non-chronological feed really, really fucks it up for those kind of living vicariously through people in nightlife, because I used to enjoy Instagram more when you could go on at like 10 and be like, oh, people are at this party. Okay, maybe I'll check it out. Or, as to your point, maybe I'll just see what it looks like. Now you see it 48 hours later.
Yeah, but can't you... First of all, you can change that, right? And second of all, what's up with your obsession with chronology? This was our Mindhunter discussion last week, right? It really got your craw. Is that the phrase? Your craw?
Got stuck in my craw?
Yeah. The chronology got stuck in your craw.
Just because you're able to vicariously live through nightlife on separate timelines, like some weird Westworld subplot about the saloon.
Time is a construct, man. But anyway, no. I mean, it doesn't bother me. It actually makes me kind of relieved because it kind of alleviates the FOMO of it. If it's happening in the moment, I'm like, oh man, that rapper came out. Like, I wish I had gone to that. But 48 hours later, I'm like, I'm good. I had a good dinner. I'm watching TV. It's chill.
That's true. It does create a boomer's paradox, if you will, when you're looking at Instagram and you're seeing exactly like a clip of like, and Young Thug is here, and you're like, okay, I'm 20 minutes away. I'm an hour away. I could get dressed. I could try to get there, but then I'm going to miss Young Thug. But it was a party that Young Thug was at, so okay, I'm just going to be content with looking at this photo of Young Thug.
Yeah.
But to your point, if it happens 3 days later, who even knows when Young Thug was there?
Was it actually Young Thug?
Was it Little Keed? Who knows?
But yeah, man.
It could be either.
Yeah.
It could be Little Baby. It could be Gunna.
A few years ago, they were saying the runway show is over, right? Through social media and people kind of scooping looks and having all this information come in like that second. And fashion designers were getting frustrated. I think someone bootlegged a Kim Kardashian dress they put it up for sale online immediately and figured out how to bootleg it like within the hour. And that was a real talking point with that industry because it's so predicated on drops, right? Or like a reveal. And that has been so compromised with our smartphones that they were talking about rethinking the whole idea of what Fashion Week is.
Sure. You have people who have moved off the schedule and just sort of periodically do what they do when they feel like it. But I think that's a legitimate concern about the industry because you're trying to churn out, your seasons and you're trying to do resort collections. And it's a schedule that the people who are ripping you off don't have to abide by. Mm-hmm. So, when Cookies does a pop-up with a drop, you can be assured that no one is knocking that off.
It's unknockoffable.
The Cookies trademark infringing gear
Easy.
is only from Cookies.
It's inspired with artistic license, man.
Oh, it's satire. It is legally satire, FYI. Does that cover us?
We're covered, man.
It's parody.
My lawyer's standing right next to me, and he says we're good.
The NBA loves parody, I've heard.
Parody, like a joke, like Mad Magazine, right?
Yes. What cookies worry? What else is going on? Are you ingesting media here in the off season? Any new docs you've enjoyed? Any music? What's going on in Kuo world?
Nonstop, man. I've been just like, August is a really weird time. I'm not gonna get wistful. I'm over my wistfulness. This is the new Kuo, man.
My man, it's September. Like
It's
the
go
summer
time.
Summer is long gone.
Yeah, I just saw that Travis Scott documentary on Netflix last night, and it's so interesting. Like, kind of related to what we were talking about. He's kind of an established dude at this point, and like it happens on our watch as we're older, but I didn't really notice it. And then I look up and I'm like, oh, he's been relevant for a really long time.
I mean, speaking of Fashion Week, Travis Scott was the official special guest for like 3 years straight before he blossomed into the star that he is today.
And the doc kind of discusses that, and I think we've talked about this. Like, we'll go to events and we'll be having a good time, drinking our red stripes and listening to some DJ. And then, like, the music will stop and someone's like, ladies and gentlemen, here's a rapper we're trying to push. I'm like, we just saw him an hour ago at a different party.
But Travis Scott was that guy. I've seen him live so many times that it was annoying. And I liked Travis Scott. Back then, I may not have listened to him religiously, but so many times it was like, and there's a special guest. And you're like, is it Travis Scott? And like, yeah, it's Travis Scott. And he would come out and like climb over some sort of ramparts with a microphone. He would do the same kind of crowd surfing. And he's a good performer, but it happened so frequently that he was just kind of the default guy.
And I remember kind of being agnostic about him and ASAP. And someone like Theophilus London and all these industry people trying to push these guys on us, where we're trying to figure out how we felt about it. And like, Travis Scott was cool. I didn't know he was going to be this level of star. I didn't know his album was going to be this good. His first album. I loved his vibe. ASAP kind of like was awesome. And later we found out maybe it was Yams, maybe it wasn't, but ASAP has become this successful fashion kind of guy, and I'm not sure that like we love his music like we love Travis Scott's music.
Well, there was an interesting moment in time there where you had the sort of crescendo of New York Fashion Week and Art Basel and the embrace of rappers and hip hop, and I would say that those are the specific guys who really benefit from that. And Rocky did a masterful job of weaving together, that moment of Alexander Wang and athleisure and goth and his music and
that ghetto gothic party.
Yeah, I mean, he and ASAP performed at the Hotel Delano during Art Basel, and then they were performing at, I want to say, the Alex Wang party here, but he performed at a ton of stuff. And they were really, really at the fulcrum of that movement in a way that I don't think people were before, and I can't necessarily say they have been prior.
And shout out to A$AP Rocky, who gets out of jail in a foreign country and doesn't say anything. No thanks to the president. Who tried to intervene and didn't quite affect things as far as we can tell, except made it very public. So maybe he did.
Thanks for nothing, my guy.
Yeah, and then the president is just like, "Yo, where's my shout out?" And A$AP's like, "No shout out." And I'm like, this is the same guy we used to party with.
Unlike the Cocoa Brothers, who made a whole song about Trump.
Oh, did they?
Black Trump, featuring Raekwon the chef.
All right. The second best Wu-Tang member after Ghostface.
Fair,
I don't know.
Fair,
I don't
fair.
know.
I
I have
think
no
that's,
idea.
I think that's accurate. But can we get back to this Travis Scott documentary? What period of time does this cover?
Recent, it centers around, no spoilers. It centers around his last tour, the Astroland tour, but it has footage of a few of his first performances to like a crowd of 15, 20 people. And it kind of tried to frame him as like this emotional kind of a rise to fame. Not for nothing, a Scientology arc, where he, through grit and grind, becomes the star that he is. And no spoilers, he loses the Grammy, and it kind of tries to talk about like his emotional experience through anticipating winning that and experiencing losing that. And it just kind of didn't work that well, because what surprised me about the documentary was there was no recklessness. He is a precise artist, and he pays a lot of attention to detail, and he has boundless energy, but he knows exactly what he wants to do. So for example, he didn't like the filming for one of his Astroland reveals where he goes along the kind of that Far Side roller coaster, and he's just like yelling out at the staff about the camera angles, being like, it's only cool if it's head on. If you shoot me from the side, it looks lame. I've told you this a million times. You have to listen to me. I'm like, oh, this is like some like 3-star chef. It's not some guy who's just wilding out and going with the flow. You know what I mean?
Travis Scott has always struck me as a bit of a cipher. And it's whether he's an industry plant, whether he's a beneficiary of the record industry, whether he's a supreme talent, whether he's a creative director in the way that you are describing him now. I have never really had any opinion on him as an artist other than I like a good amount of his music, and he seems to have a good ear for beats and hooks, etc. He seems to have a knack for finding artists who are going to blow up before they do. You know, he had records with, like Quavo early on. And anyway, I do like his stuff, but I have never really thought about him as anything more than almost a plastic figurine from like the rodeo cover. I kind of view him as a very enigmatic figure in rap in a way that I can't really say I view anyone else. Like, I just don't know anything about him. I don't know anything that he thinks or feels. I don't even really know what his voice sounds like. He's just a total mystery.
Well, this is what the great thing about this doc, because it really focuses around his relationships with his team and his family, and not his music. And it got me to thinking that I really am envious of Zoomers, because they get to experience all these amazing stars who don't really like abide by the same rules of participation that our generation did. Like, we were all about songs, 36 Chambers, Illmatic, Smells Like Teen Spirit, like these anthems. These guys are just vibey. I mean, of course there's anthems like Lil Nas X, shout out to him, wrote one of the greatest songs in American history. But it's less about like singing along to these emotional, meaningful is the wrong word. These ideas that connect to you in a certain way. And I think being at a Travis Scott concert feels like being at a hardcore show, and you know all the words, everyone's singing along to that, but it's more of an experience you have with people who are like-minded, as opposed to sitting down and getting into the lyrics and the verses of Old Town Road. You know what I mean? I
have a healthy degree of envy for young people who get to go to rap shows that are fun and that
so
have
cool
girls there, say, and it's a social environment versus a bunch of dudes nodding their heads and like kind of scowling at the stage. Well,
you say that, and yes, because just to clarify that, it's cool to have like nerds and girls and older people and younger people, because back in the day when you could go to a hip hop show, it was kind of like the same guy there, through the crowd. And it's nice to see this thing become so big that it's just pop music at this point. Travis Scott could sell out MSG on a whim.
And at the same time, the landscape is diverse enough that if you want to listen to someone who's wordy, like an Earl Sweatshirt, they're there. Or whether it's Kendrick or Chase, guys who kind of cater to an older generation sensibility. Those guys are there. But if you want Little Xan and Little Keaton and like those guys,
Always.
they are available as well.
Yeah. I remember I went to an Odd Future show at Santos Party House when I think Tyler was about to drop Goblin, or maybe even before that. And it was ruckus, and it was very aggressive and fun, and people were stage diving. And at some point, he yells into the mic, making fun of all like the old dudes in the back. And we were just standing in the back, like we weren't that old even. This was like 10 years ago. And we looked at each other and we were like, yep. And we're enjoying your show.
We are the horses in the back.
Yeah, we were just like, we'll take it and we enjoy it. He's like, you motherfuckers in the back, like, you know, like all you old guys, get the fuck out of here. And we were like, we just really love you, man.
I think I've told this tale before on Cookies, so I'll make it short. But I was writing a story for XXL magazine about Odd Future right when they went to South by Southwest for the first time, and were just kind of a music, especially indie music phenomenon. And I was shadowing them and going to different events and hanging out with them at their house they were staying in the Austin suburbs. And it was a really cool moment to be around these guys who were not trained by a label. They didn't have any particular experience. They didn't really have any money. I remember Haji being like, I have $5 on me, man. But we would get out of an SUV and have to literally run to a venue because we would get chased by like hundreds and hundreds of fans. It was a really cool sort of moment. And at that point, it felt like they were going to be this completely monstrous group, or at least that was the vibe in the air. And it didn't really turn out to be that way. You know, Tyler is a star and a really interesting figure in rap. And the other guys, you know, Earl wasn't even there at the time. He was still, you know, on a tropical island. But that was a really cool moment. And I'm super happy that one of the benefits of writing about music was being there for that. Even if to other people, you might be like, Odd Future, it didn't really turn out to be what we suspected. But that was such a, I don't know, it was very memorable.
I kind of have like maybe a more aggressive take on that. And this is the benefit of like seeing, this is the benefit of kind of just getting older. But I remember when that Odd Future stuff came out, it felt like, right, you're right. It felt like, are these guys going to be a great niche group that will have their following or something else? And it turns out, and this is my aggressive take, I think Tyler, the creator, even though he's not especially good at rapping, his talent ends up making him one of the most influential artists ever. And I think what we're seeing with all these there's no Travis Scott without Tyler. There's no SoundCloud rap scene without Tyler. There's no Supreme without Tyler. And to be able, as kind of reasonably young people, to see Odd Future and Supreme be things that we really love, and then those things grow into the things that everyone loves and everyone's trying to like shoot at, or like address in their own work. It's kind of reassuring that the things that you like end up being understood by a larger community and don't stay niche, right?
Yeah, and it's also a testament to the collective power of youthful enthusiasm. And when you see it, it doesn't really matter what the ramifications were. It feeds into the same sort of cultural like floodwater. Like it doesn't matter that Tyler didn't become the biggest rapper. What they were doing fed into a larger movement of those things you were describing. And yeah, if you go back and you look at it and you say, we were comparing them to Wu-Tang, and you're like, well, that doesn't really make sense.
Yeah, even bigger than Wu-Tang.
Right. And in retrospect, you're like, okay, so who is Method Man? Who is Raekwon? Who is Ghostface? You're like, there was only two rappers that people really deeply cared about in that crew. But what they did was part of, you know, in I guess, Ghostbusters vernacular, the pink slime flowing beneath the city.
Yeah, for sure. And their influence, and Wu-Tang is interesting because they put a bow on something a little bit, in my opinion. And something like Odd Future kind of opened something else. And I think about this all the time. This is cookie sample sale related. It's like when I was a teenager, I used to like hand paint all these. I used to go to shows and hand paint shirts. So if I go to see a band, I would like take my acrylic paints out, get a blank t-shirt and just paint their name on it and draw like a drawing and go to the show with the band shirt on, which is super dorky, but I was really excited about that stuff. And you couldn't get these shirts anywhere. And in the time I was like, well, by the time I'm 30, 40, 50, like I'm going to be I hope I'm going to be making like paintings and be serious and leave all this stuff behind. And here we are, sample sale, and like all I think about is t-shirts, like, and you have all these other things in your life. Like, I don't know, let me ask you a question. Like, you're a writer. I'm sure there was a part of you growing up being like, well, I'd like to write like a novel, not necessarily fiction, but I'd like to write something that people revere as a historical document. And then we're here and we're like, yo, I just hang out with RJ Barrett. I'm going to publish something in GQ tomorrow. And I love it. Do you know what I mean?
Well, interesting you mentioned that, because when I was back home over the weekend, I was sifting through old papers and folders that had been just left at my parents' house. And I found this NFL draft guide that I had printed on a typewriter and like tried to arrange it with like Xerox copies of images that I had cut out and made like an NFL draft guide.
Yeah.
From like the 90s. And I don't even follow football anymore. And I was going back and reading it. And, it was obviously poorly written and it was done on a typewriter. So it was just littered with typos. But it was just an enormous amount of work. It was just like Bob Whitfield of the Falcons has one eye. Will that stop him from being a star? I'm like, I don't even remember who these guys are. But I just sat around for hours on end and made a draft guide that I Xeroxed off just to have for myself.
And like, yeah, and I think every generation has its own strategy, but I'm really looking forward to being a parent in that regard, because as soon as these kids show interest, what me and you have learned is like those interests kind of carry through to your whole life. And this is kind of related to, like, not to get too sin binny, but I navigate in the world of like the painting a lot for my day job, and you have a split, and you either kind of access the part of your brain that recognizes images and you recreate those images, or you access the part of your brain that creates new images that you've never seen before. And those two things kind of talk to each other endlessly, and that's the whole thing, and that's your whole day. And I think it's right. Like, I was obsessed with charts when I was 10. Right? And I thought I would grow up painting portraits, but I end up growing up painting charts. And no one could have told me then, being like, this is a way to express like your profession and your place in history and whatever, like all those things you go through as a writer or musician or podcaster, the things that interest you will forever be of interest to you, which I think is kind of a hopeful thing.
That is hopeful. I think that's a very nice conclusion to a section where we're talking about our teen periodicals. The artistic output of 12-year-olds.
Oh, man.
Now, speaking of the youth, Joe Johnson.
Oh, yeah, the spring chicken.
We're a little
He's
desperate
like 15 years younger than us, too.
We're desperate for basketball news. So Joe Johnson, shout out to him, the MVP, I believe, of the Big Three, which is apparently going to earn him a tryout with NBA teams. Now, do we believe this? Do we believe that NBA teams are interested in Joe Johnson because they have seen him dominate a league of guys who are not good enough to be in the NBA? Is this true?
This is like a poor value versus good value thing. I always think you should roster with your last bench spot someone with a potential to outperform their contract or the way we see them, you know? Usually a young guy who maybe under 25 would be helpful. But Joe Johnson looks good, man. Are you telling me he can't step on the court for the Bucks and play 15 minutes? I mean, I believe it. He looked good.
Joe Johnson is 38 years old.
Woo!
He's playing half-court basketball with the big three. Mm-hmm. He can certainly shoot. He can certainly score. He was not a good player in 2016-17 when he played last. But is he going to be in the NBA because we saw him get buckets against Nate Robinson?
I think somebody who could score off like the 8th or 9th guy off your bench, even if he doesn't get into games, some guy who could score is valuable. I find myself getting too caught up in all the things I love, which is like defense and coming off screens and passing. But at the end of the day, like his scoring alone makes him a reasonably like ancient version of Lou Williams.
It's kind of interesting because if Joe Johnson is able to finesse his handiwork in the big three into returning to the NBA, what does that do for the big three? Does it mean that the big three can be a place to resuscitate your career, or does it reinforce the fact that these guys are not even close to good enough to be in the NBA?
It's both, right? Like Cuttino Mobley is not going to resuscitate his career. Although I think when he played years ago, I think he was like, if I'm good enough, can I get another shot? I think every one of these players thinks in those terms because every one of these players wants back in the league. But there's a handful of guys. If Royce White goes nuts, would you not give him like a reasonable contract? If Greg Oden looks, he's a bit too old now.
I mean, Josh Smith is only 33. Like, that's not young, but it's also not 38.
But he's out of the league for a different reason, right?
Because he can't shoot.
And also maybe some personality stuff. Like, where's Josh Childress? This goes back to the conversation of some of these players are inexplicably out of the league and we'll never know really why. But there's useful players that are no longer around, and Lance Thomas is still a Knick.
People have suggested that Carmelo Anthony should play in the big three to show people that he still has it. That, to me, sounds like the same way people suggest that like Ben Simmons should sign a contract where he doesn't get the max if he doesn't learn to shoot. It sounds like they want publicly to humiliate Melo.
This is the whole fan thing. We pretend that we want one thing, but really all we want to do is mock somebody and make jokes, which is fair. Melo should put it on ice. No more videos of him in the gym. No more anything. We know what he is, and he's got a window of like maybe a year.
I disagree. I just want more videos of Melo giving Julius Randle buckets, but it's also heavily edited and curated where it's like, looks like Melo went 12 of 12 in the gym against the Knicks starting power forward.
I mean, I'm speaking in terms of his own self-interest. He should not really play for anybody, I think. Because him getting buckets is, we know what he is, and if he plays in the big three and he doesn't dominate, his ceiling is not as high as his floor is low.
You get what I mean, though, right? About the idea of him playing in the big three to prove that he can still do something. It's just to embarrass him. It's the same way when people are like, you know, why won't DeAndre Jordan shoot foul shots underhanded? It's like, oh, you want to shame this guy.
Yeah.
You want to make him look like a clown.
Yeah.
Even if you think, yes, it's technically possible that he could learn to shoot and you know, underhanded. You want to make him look like, you want him to acknowledge that he's bad at basketball in a way that he should now look like a clown on the court.
And this is the burden of players with gravity. I mean, we've been workshopping this this personality gravity thing. And this is the curse because Dwayne Wade looked terrible towards the end. And he had some flashes, but we kind of gave him a pass. I don't know if it's because of Miami or that he won a championship, but he doesn't get the ire that Melo does. And Dirk Nowitzki kind of gets a pass. We love him. He's a well-loved player, Ben. And
Dirk was a very bad player for a long time.
And we gave him a pass.
And everyone was totally fine with it. Mm-hmm. I think a lot about that Mavericks team and how much leeway they were given after beating the Heatles, because that was a huge cultural moment where LeBron, again, feeding into this idea that NBA players deserve to be shamed for their indiscretions and their perceived ego. And LeBron was publicly humiliated. He didn't want to take jumpers. He was viewed as a coward and a choker, and all these negative things were thrust upon LeBron James because they lost to the Mavericks. And at the same time, Dirk, who was reviled up to that moment and a disgraced player, had his entire reputation bolstered and became a beloved hero because of the fact that he had taken down LeBron. And that finals, if you look back at the personnel that was on the court with LeBron, it was wild. He was playing with no shooters. And and you look at the next year when they beat the Thunder, LeBron shot far worse from three, but they cruised to a victory because they actually had floor spacing.
And I think NBA Twitter generally has been moving to forgive LeBron for, our incessant mocking him or teasing him for his failures against Dirk, because his team was really shallow. And as we're seeing all these huge teams get built, we're realizing how much weight he put on his own performance and what he had to do. And that was when his greatness was most on display, when he wasn't necessarily the assassin shooter that some superstars are, but he was such a playmaker and incredible force on the court that he did so many things and affected every play to the point where he just willed his team to the finals.
The thing I've sort of been thinking about is that with LeBron James and guys like Giannis, Ben Simmons, Draymond Green, this prototype of larger players who can guard multiple positions, who can score, who create shots for their teammates, I think that's what the current Team USA is kind of missing. Those guys are so valuable to winning games. And if you look at the way that LeBron always goes to the finals and the way that Draymond Green transformed Golden State despite the presence of Curry, and even when they had Durant, they weren't the same team when Dre was not activated. And then Giannis winning MVP, I think we're looking at a prototype that has an enormous value in terms of making a team work. And I'm looking at Team USA and I'm wondering, does it operate the same way when you have a little guard doing it, a small guy like Kemba? Is there something different about having a big guy who can rebound, defend, pass, create shots, and score?
This is the Cookies ethos, right?
Big on big?
Yeah.
Carb on carb?
Yeah. You're talking about a very limited resource, and I'm with you. Sorry to interrupt, but the players you named are the only players who could do this.
And I'm like, I don't know if it's a coincidence that these teams who have these big, versatile guys just are good in a way that Kemba Walker can't necessarily put his team in a headlock and wrestle it to being a quality team. And I don't want to be like all this like size bias and these little guys, they aren't good, but it's starting to kind of become a thing. Yeah. Where I'm wondering if most little guys, and there are anomalies like say Steph Curry, but most little guys may not be able to do this.
Yeah, and I'm obsessed recently with trying to redescribe dribble bias, crouch bias, all that stuff. And I'm settling on the idea of like optical illusions. basically it's a simpler way to say optically it doesn't make sense. Like we know we have the baggage to say Kemba Walker can take over a game because we remember Michael Jordan, Allen Iverson, all those players.
We also remember Kemba Walker.
That's right.
In the Garden, single-handedly leading his team to a national championship. So
you can't.
Maybe there are different tiers in which that skill set can lead a team to the greatest glory. I don't know.
And that's why RJ Barrett is a so-so prospect. He's like a C-level prospect skill-wise, but he offers, in my opinion, like a B+ upside in this regard. If the Knicks are smart enough to play him at the 1, he has that big body advantage.
Yeah, I've always sort of tried to avoid compartmentalizing guys like this. You know, I'm a big Chris Paul fan. I think might be the best point guard who's ever lived. He's
an anomaly, though.
He's an absolute genius, and he turned teams into great ones. But maybe there is something to be said that in the same way, when we're talking about econometrics and a superstar's contract is worth so much because there are only so few of them. There are only so many of them, and that is few. That when you have a guy who can satisfy multiple positions defensively, rebounding, scoring, maybe some rim protection, and distributing, it's just such an advantage. It's like you have someone to give you all these resources rather than it coming from a whole collection of players. That's what a superstar looks like in 2019, other than these ones like, say, Steph Curry, who's just totally unique and weird. But I don't know. This just really occurred to me, man. I'm still sorting through it myself.
You have a point, because in the FIFA tournament, we're seeing Giannis kind of maybe misused by his coach and not looking like the best player in the world. And then we're seeing someone like Jokic, who's just like gliding through the game and is just displaying all of his skills in the European style, like in ways that we don't necessarily see in the NBA. And Giannis, to me, is absolutely the best player on earth right now, but he doesn't offer the overall package of what you're describing, right?
He gives you a lot of it. He gives you the defense, the rim protection, the scoring. He's a good passer, but he's not a great passer in the way that Jokic is. I think Giannis is better than Jokic, but Jokic absolutely fits the criteria that I'm trying to describe. His defense is okay. It's gotten better.
Yeah.
He is not a good defensive player, but the rebounding, the passing, the scoring, some shooting, it's really having distribution and scoring coming from someone who gives you, say, rebounding and some rim protection. It just seems to matter so much right now. And we talk about basketball genius a lot, and Jokic is obviously one. But I'm becoming heightist. I'll admit it. I'm becoming heightist, Kuo, and I'm sorry that I have to break it to you like this.
I think we've been heightist all along, but we can just finally admit it.
There's something about basketball that seems to be heightist.
Listen, Toronto Raptors can have their parade. I'm going to start a short pride parade for all the shorter NBA players out there. Fred VanVleet, leave that parade and come to ours, because we need representation.
He was awesome in the finals. By no means am I saying little guys can't be enormously important and
Just
difference
dig your
makers.
hole, man.
I'm just saying Lowry, he's great. He does all the little things. There's a number of guys who are Kemba. He's a wonderful player. But man, when you can get a whole bunch of qualities from one player, it really just makes building a team so easy.
And that's where I kind of am very excited to see, and not quite a huge fan of Trae Young, because I think after the excitement of his second album comes out and we kind of shift to other gravitational pulls of other players, he has weaknesses that are real, and they come on the defensive end, and he doesn't have those genius skills. What I'm really disappointed in terms of
Are you saying he's like the Beatnuts? Like he dropped a classic EP, but like the album was like just fine?
I've said the word beatnut so many times in my life that just the other day in 2019, I realized how ridiculous the name of their group was. That would never happen now.
Beatnuts forever, die hard, motherfuckers.
Yeah. But if we want to talk about like all these alternate realities that everyone's talking about, I constantly think about the fact that we were so close to seeing Lonzo Ball and Ben Simmons on the same court. And I don't feel like we've been privy to two geniuses on a good team currently.
The only one I would say was that I think Curry and Draymond is close. And I do think that LeBron and Kyrie is close, but Kyrie's genius is based on skill.
Yeah, and same with Curry.
Yeah. Like they're smart players, but both of them, they have such an outlier skill that they don't actually have to be smarter than other people.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
But, sorry. The only thing I was trying to rope this back into was that Team USA doesn't have those guys.
Because it's a limited resource, right?
Right, but that to me is why this team is beating Turkey by 1 point. They don't have smart basketball players. They have little guards like Kemba who can distribute and score. They have some guys like Donovan Mitchell who are talented.
He's a knucklehead though, man.
But that's what I mean. Jason Tatum takes dumb shots.
Yeah.
Donovan Mitchell takes dumb shots. They don't have basketball geniuses on this team.
I love Donovan Mitchell because he's exactly the type of player that I imagine to foil the idea of the Jordan archetype. And he looks like Jordan. He moves amazing. He looks like he should be the best player on the court, and he's just never been that good. He scores a lot in bunches. Is this a summer of Booker?
It might be, but the one thing I was going to say before we go to Booker, and it is absolutely, without question, the summer of Booker. Yeah. When I'm looking at this roster for USA basketball, Harrison Barnes, kind of a notorious chucker. Jaylen Brown, chucker. Chris Middleton, I don't know.
I like him more than you, but yeah.
No, but he's pretty
okay.
good.
Yeah.
He's pretty good. He can run the pick and roll fairly well for being like 6'8", but he loves a good mid-range jumper. Mitchell, chucker. Joe Harris, unitasker. Tatum, chucker. Miles Turner, whatever. Derek White, good defender. There are not a lot of guys who you look at on that roster other than, Mason Plumlee, or one of the Plumlees. He's a good passer, but he's just not an elite talent. I don't know. That USA basketball team, it does not surprise me that they are seemingly struggling.
I'd like to blame Colangelo for this, but all these players said no, and the good players don't really value this because it's not an actual thing. As we're finding out, it's really hard to watch the games. There's not a lot of social media buzz around it.
I can't watch the games, dude. I don't know how to do it. I don't have ESPN Plus, and it strikes me as beyond odd that you have Jokic and Giannis and Team USA with several marginal NBA players like Jason Tatum, and we can't watch the games on TV. We can't get them easily on the internet.
Yeah, and this probably is like a FIBA issue and a licensing issue, but there is not much buzz around this. It's oddly hard to find a box score. I wake up and I'm like, let's see how poorly Donovan Mitchell shot. And it takes me
granted, it's on at 8 a.m. Like there is a stumbling block to it being collectively enjoyed, but like,
and it's not the World Cup of soccer.
But I was up at 8 o'clock. I was trying to watch it and I gave up.
Why is it not tape delayed? Why don't they rebroadcast it on NBA TV at 7 p.m.? Like, we know the results. I'd like to see the game anyway.
To your point, it's got to be a FIBA thing because why would you not?
Yeah, and I think all sports in general and broadcast and TV and everything is changing on the fly so much. Like, I think Netflix for the first time this week is releasing a show weekly, which is a Great British Bake Off, because there's results involved and they don't want spoilers and they want to generate more momentum for this show if momentum exists, which it doesn't.
I'm with that, man. As much as I enjoy a good binge, there is something about the anticipation of a show and then the discussion of it and then attempting to foresee what's going to happen next. And even though Westworld wasn't that good because it had all these multiple timelines that you love so much.
Loved it.
But that was the last one that I can remember watching where I was trying to keep abreast of it. And you'd read updates and, oh, time to tune in. Let me make sure I watch this. I know people are into that with Succession right now. I'm still on the first season, and it's good. I like it. It's funny, etc. But it is a rarity, and it is enjoyable when you're actually tuning in to make sure you catch something on a weekly basis.
It's just a different thing. I don't know why everyone or I feel like I have to choose sides with this, because I love to binge. Like, I binged Mindhunter, and it was a really great week. I had such a fun time watching that show, and I didn't want it to end. Like, when you get talk about old, if you get a book, either you read it really fast or you read it really slow, and someone can spoil the book for you at any point. But I think we don't have to choose, and I would like to watch the Great British Bake Off all at once, because I want to move on to the next thing. There's too many things to watch. A side note, I think Succession is bad. Is that okay? Is that okay to say?
If you can avoid spoilers, not only for our listeners, but for me, why is this your I mean, after you said that you love Mindhunter, which is remarkably stupid.
I love Mindhunter.
Why do you dislike Succession, which in my estimation is smart?
Ooh, that's a tough word for me to describe stuff. But I think because everyone's an asshole and you're not rooting for anybody, and it's just like...
Team USA?
Is there a guy that... Why isn't... Mitchell Robinson got hurt or didn't make the team? I forget.
I mean, I think they're saving him for the Olympics.
He would be the best player on the team right away.
The games that matter.
That's right. Succession, like, it is this... I forgot the writer who wrote the Steve Jobs movie, that guy, Sorkin. It has this snappy, bitey, sarcastic, cynical thing to it that feels like I'm drowning slowly. And I need to come up for air and have a character I like. And
I hear that. And smart is an irritating word, because, like, does having a lot of vocabulary and being kind of funny make something smart? Does having an interesting plot make it smart? Does it does it having a show that's visually stunning make it smart? I know, like, I'm being very vague, but
I get it.
I'm also only like 5 episodes in, so I'm like, this is smart. This is smart. Like, they're cracking jokes. It's knowledgeable about the media industry in a way that I can see why it's catnip to people who are tweeting about it and people in press.
Yeah, and the way we frame the financial world as an evil, and I love anything stock related, anything about numbers and like selling out and buying out, like that stuff is great. But I think Succession has an issue with, as these guys and as his family backstabs each other, no spoilers, I just don't care. I'm like, yeah, whatever. This is when I become the anarchist, the chaotic anarchist. Because I'm like, whatever, you guys should just go away. I don't care who or where or how. I'll still watch it, obviously.
You just want $1,000 a month because you are a technocrat.
That's right, a technocratic liberal.
But so you mentioned earlier that this was the summer of Booker, and we're talking about Devin Booker, not Sixers legend Trevor Booker. Why is it the summer of Devin Booker? Can you explain that?
Do we love him? Okay, so before this summer, he was framed as, to me personally, as a Mamba kind of dude. Loves his shots, loves volume, gets buckets. The team needs me. I need to hoist up 30 shots, high scores, no passes, no defense, whatever. Pretty classic Kentucky scorer. And then this summer, all of a sudden, there was that controversy with him in the gym and Joakim Noah, who might be the boomer, and him just being like, we care about practice? Like, I'm trying to work on my game. You're trying to double team me? I'm kind of on Booker's side with this. And
look,
now,
we struggled as a podcast to determine the boomer. We couldn't pinpoint the boomer.
And then we came out on top because we decided after this recent development that we might be Booker guys, man. Because Team USA, he was mocked for not wanting to play on team, not like Donovan Mitchell who wants to play for his country. And I believe yesterday, I might be getting these details kind of wrong, but I think somebody had pointed out that he should be there to help the team. And maybe it was Bill Simmons, your boy.
It was Bill Simmons. That's correct.
And Bill Simmons has been very excited, understandably, about this tournament. And shout out to Bill Simmons, the inventor of all this. I just had to throw that in there. He's the best. But
respect to the architect, Kuo.
He started all of this, man. But he's very invested in this FIBA tournament, and his Celtics are in it.
Yeah, I was gonna say because it's Team Celtics,
which is fun, man.
It's the police procedural. It's Donovan Mitchell and the Celtics.
And we know it's not a great idea to have your best players playing meaningless scrimmages. and he's been mocking players who didn't want to play, being like, oh, you're going to play against gym guys and not the best competition in the world? Good luck wanting it more than the next player this season. I see you. But, the cookies ethos is we kind of see the opposite of that, or maybe I see the opposite of that, where there's benefits to resting and just chilling and saving your brain for when it counts. So he went at Devin Booker, right?
Your ethos is sit everyone and always tank. Mine is more do what you want. If players don't want to go, that's cool. They want to play, also fine. You just want everyone to be benched for years on end.
I think management has to protect players from themselves. Absolutely. I think
sounds like a technocrat, perhaps.
Yeah, I mean, we don't appoint management for nothing, right? I mean, it's management.
You're the king of load management.
Oh, I think these guys should chill. And even though a player wants to gut through an ankle injury, Yao Ming should have sat, Grant Hill should have sat, and they wanted to play, and they let them play, and their careers ended.
I'm with that. I agree that they should be protected from themselves. I also think at some point, I think at every point, if a guy really says, dude, I'm just dying to play in FIBA, you can advise him not to do it, but you can't stop him. So you might as well just say, hey, do what you want, man, but here are the potential complications.
I mean, I think it should be written into contracts now, sort of like when Jay Williams got into that motorcycle accident. And dude, it was in your contract. You cannot ride a motorcycle. It's but I wanted to. I'm like, that's fair.
No, I like this idea. We're going to write into your contract that you can't play for FIBA.
Yeah, totally. I mean, I'm down for that. I want to write into the contract that you cannot play at the YMCA.
Here's the thing. There's I believe it's called a love of the game contract stipulation that guys are allowed to play basketball. I want to say that that's what it's actually called in NBA contracts, is the love of the game clause.
Yikes.
Where you can't stop guys from jumping on the court because they're basketball players.
But it's interesting because in those same contracts, you're not allowed to, shout out to Larry Sanders, skateboard or play other sports or go skiing. That just seems like
I think part of it is also because of, say, endorsements or commercials or charity or whatever. It would be whack if your player's I'm not allowed to actually dribble a basketball in a commercial or do a summer camp because I could get hurt. And you have to allow guys to make their living and be who they are as basketball players.
Can we have a Space Jam clause? You're not allowed to be in Space Jam.
Yeah, Anthony Davis.
But, I mean, I understand that. And I understand you have to work on your game. I'm not saying your game is polished by the time you get
love Devin Booker. You just want him to work on his game.
Well, he clapped back to Bill Simmons because immediately after Bill Simmons called Devin Booker out, his boy Jason Tatum twisted an ankle. And Simmons was like, no, this can't be happening. And Booker was like, yeah, dude, that's why.
I think he said something like "God bless" or "thoughts and prayers" or something along those lines. It was a nice, succinct, classy clapback.
Yeah, it was cool, and being a summer, having it be your summer doesn't mean Booker's takes have to align with mine. I just love this back and forth, and I kind of agree with the way he's handled everything these last few months.
Look, I love Bill Simmons, but it was also a moment in which I'm like, do I like Booker now? Am I turning into a Booker fan based on him just kind of being bitchy this offseason?
Let me ask you kind of a overarching question. Let's say Devin Booker becomes this kind of player we've been talking about, a basketball genius. Is it more fun to have him be a Kobe than to actually be amazing?
Absolutely. Because I wrote a story about Devin Booker 2 years ago, and I interviewed him. He was very nice. His teammates spoke really highly of him. And I really took a deep dive into film, specifically with his passing, to kind of try to understand, was he just a chucker, or was he someone that's going to be able to be that elusive, valuable star who can create baskets for their teammates on a elite level, as well as scoring 30 points a game when needed. And I think the results are kind of mixed. He's good at certain things. He's good at looking ahead and finding guys down the floor. He's good at throwing backdoor lobs. He's good at using his dribble to sort of suck in the defenders and then kick it out. But he's not a basketball genius. He doesn't have that innate touch to find guys in the way that even like someone like, I don't know, like LeBron and Chris Paul, but even like someone like Joe Ingles. They just have the knack of finding an angle. The timing is right. Booker is a adequate distributor, but I'm not sure he can make a leap into being a James Harden style player. So yes, I just want him to be a chucker. Go out there and try to score 70 and enrage people. Like be the most zoomer boomer that you can be, Devin.
Yeah, and this is like a conflict I have all the time as a fan. I want the Lakers to be Lakish. I want the Knicks to be Knickish. I don't necessarily want the Knicks to all of a sudden behave like a smart team.
The Knicks taught you it was okay to be weird.
That's right. Sitting in the dark, staring at candles. But
a lot of these teams want to be in the NBA. Like the Knicks know that that's not what it's about. It's about being relegated and being yourself.
If being in the NBA is wrong, I don't want to be right. I mean,
that relegation music.
Right. It's are the Knicks the Billie Eilish of the NBA?
Relegation music.
Listen, just let me just bask in my darkness. This mic stand looks like
the most ghetto goth basketball team there is. ASAP Knicks.
Yeah. My mic stand is a human spine. Just leave me alone in my darkness. But this is the whole conflict of being a fan, because I just really want these players to be the most maximum version of themselves. And when they transform on us, we have to recalibrate all the time. And, we could just do it on the fly. But it's nice when Trae Young is the most Trae Young he could be. Like, Luka Doncic is not that fun because he's kind of good at everything and he's a little slow. But he's just so great. Trae Young is very fun because he has weaknesses, right?
Right. But also, players are less malleable than franchises because a team like the Raptors was defined by DeMar DeRozan. They traded him, and they just kind of became a different team. They are now smart, and they are futuristic with, a bunch of really good athletes with like long arms, and they play this, spider-like defense. And it's just a different team than we saw in Toronto for several years. LeBron left the Cavs, and now they don't have an identity. So it's more that players are the immutable organisms here versus franchises. Look at the Nets. Are the Nets more fun now that they're good and they have a competent front office? Like, I don't know. They're still just kind of the Nets. I respect them. They have smart people in charge. They've signed really good talent. They're going to be a watchable team. They're going to be exciting. But is that do I feel any differently about the Nets? I don't know. I kind of like how the Lakers are the Lakers.
Yeah, and I binged Ramona Shelburne's 30 for 30 about Donald Sterling and LA and how that whole thing unfolded, and how Donald Sterling kind of was like in the shadow of the Buss family, or Dr. Buss, and the way he treated a franchise in a city like LA. And immediately I thought about, gravity, and you're right. A team like the Nets could have done all the things that the Knicks wanted to do, but how are we talking about the Knicks more still because we care more about the Knicks, right? And we can talk about colors and history and memory and all those things. It just comes down to gravity. And this podcast series was interesting for many reasons. Ramona Shelburne has pretty much carte blanche access to all these players and players in this story because she's very well loved and she's been around a while.
Before you jump into this, a little context about this. It's about Donald Sterling, who was ejected or forced to sell the team because of racist things he said, racist things he did. He had always been kind of a blight on the league in terms of being a controversial and widely disliked owner, but it came to a head, and then he was forced to sell the team and sadly walked away with like $2.5 billion or something.
Right.
But this is an ESPN documentary
or podcast
series. And I mean, I don't know exactly where it starts and ends. I haven't listened to it, but just to give some context, that's what it's about.
Yeah, and I'm just gonna spoil it, so I'm gonna go for
Spoil away.
So the beginning, it starts with him being essentially a slumlord and lending Jerry Buss money to buy the Lakers, and then realizing that's what he wanted. He wanted the fame, he wanted the Hollywood thing. So he buys the Clippers, moves them to LA, and then the Clippers are the worst franchise in the NBA for a few years. I believe they drafted Christian Laettner, and he decides to play in Europe for a season, as opposed to playing for a notably and known unique owner in that he could be racist. He's a slumlord. He doesn't care about winning. Shout out, one of the first people to publicly admit to the benefits of tanking for lottery picks. He's like, we lose now, we win later. And he was much reviled for that, which is interesting, thinking about what happened in the last decade.
He was brazen in terms of tanking, and hilariously, he failed to get Patrick Ewing.
Yeah, that's right. And the most interesting parts for me, well, I really wanted to know about the ownership part of the NBA, and Ramona Shelburne has incentive not to discuss too much of that, but she touches on that and how that ownership community runs the NBA and not the commissioner, and how fans and players and GMs and the commissioner himself kowtow to the ownership because they pay for everything. And I feel like we forget that sometimes, and I'm glad we're more in the era of player agency, but it still holds true. So I wanted more dirt on that.
What's interesting about the dynamic of NBA ownership, or governors, as they would now prefer to be called, governors, is that the NBA emerged from being a fringe sport to being an absolute Goliath internationally, domestically, etc. Just a money printing machine monster. But someone like Donald Sterling bought into the league at a point when it was not in its current mainstream state. And he got into there in the 70s, maybe the early 80s. I forget exactly when he got into it. But this is an entirely different league. So when you have someone who's this malevolent creature like Donald Sterling in the league as a remnant, a vestigial organ of the league that the NBA used to be, it kind of makes sense. Because now, if you want to own an NBA team, you generally have to be so enormously rich. You have to be a billionaire to begin with, that you can't necessarily be, or excuse me, it's harder to be just a seedy slumlord like Donald Sterling. I guess, of course, someone would say like Dan Gilbert and like Quicken Loan is also a slumlord of sorts. But the point is, these guys were dinosaurs of a league and a time when there wasn't the kind of scrutiny that there is now.
No, they just needed ownership. And what Ramona Shelburne points out is, I think Sterling saw Magic Johnson enter the Hollywood Lakers scene, and that become a cultural pivot point for America. And she talks a lot about the parties they used to throw at the arena and how it was like the Studio 54 at the time, and he would attend all these parties and he would want that too. And we've heard about the Clippers white parties forever, where everyone dresses up in white and he's the only person who dresses up in black. And even Blake Griffin is forced to like address the community, and all these players have coming out now, like Ryan Hollins, Matt Barnes, Blake Griffin. Thankfully, Quentin Richardson and Darius Miles are a part of this, like my two favorite guys. And they talk about how awkward it was, and they didn't even have anywhere to practice. He was just making money off of other teams and revenue sharing. And if you wanted to see the Knicks and you live in LA, you go to the Clippers game because the Lakers ticket is too expensive. And he just made so much money off of this. No spoilers, he turns out to be a brazen racist, or if you're in your most apologetic sense, he is a victim of this awful baby boomer time where like he's just going with this awful flow and he is not adapting. He's too old to adapt or see the forest beyond the trees. And he's caught on tape by his mistress saying these awful, awful things that are still shocking now. And he sells the team for billions of dollars to Steve Ballmer, who owns Microsoft.
Yes, I mean, he bought the team for $12.5 million
sold it for $2.3 billion
in 1981, which was the equivalent probably of 3 times that, let's say $35 million. So just an incredibly profitable enterprise overall, despite the fact that they were one of the most unsuccessful teams in NBA history under his tenure. He was able to turn $35 million equivalent into $2.5 billion. That's just insane.
It's crazy. And we talk about the Prokhorov profit all the time. He kind of made the same thing. And shout out to I can't believe
Stop getting mad at players' contracts.
No.
Andrew Wiggins, you deserve every penny of your $25 and $30 million a year. Andrew Wiggins, get your money, because like Donald Sterling, just an old, washed-up racist boomer, was able to turn $35 million into $2.5 billion by the virtue of being inept.
And Taj Gibson, Bobby Portis, Alfred Payton, you guys are all underpaid.
Get paid. Get your money.
Yeah.
Every dollar, rinse it out of these freaking boomers.
Sit out preseason, protest, like don't do anything you don't want to do. And this documentary goes through the whole
Kawhi Leonard needs to be concerned about his health for his
sit out a season.
Free agency in 2 years. Sit out for 2 years. Go back on the market. Make sure your hip is fine.
Yeah, and the spoiler of this podcast is Donald Sterling gets ushered out of the league unprecedentedly. Well, Silver has his most memorable moment as he ejects Sterling from the league, and his wife becomes kind of a center of attention because is she complicit or is she?
She's no V. Stiviano. I'll say that much.
And then the reveal at the end of this podcast, spoiler, is they're still together. They were never apart. So she negotiated money for her and Donald. They still are a couple. And this podcast ends up being more about the relationship of V and these two people, and how V kind of overstepped her line. Like, she was allowed to be Donald Sterling's mistress, but she took it to another level where Donald Sterling's wife was like, you broke the code of what we do. And together
she was his silly rabbit.
Did he call you that?
No.
And she's great. Shout out to Kat Marnell, the fourth cookie. But I'm with Kat. Like, V is endlessly interesting, and kind of I'm not that mad at her. But the reveal is they made all this money, and we were trying to parse all this nuance between Donald Sterling and his wife, and they grifted the NBA.
Well, shout out to grifters and the fraudsters. and to that end, we should remind you that there is a cookies pop-up at Kinfolk on Saturday from noon to 5 where you can come and get grifted out of your hard-earned ducats and your shekels, and you can buy exclusive, newly dripped cookies merch and hang out with the boys. The perfect grift.
We're going to have some old stuff there that we don't have. It's a limited run, man. We don't make a ton of this stuff. So if it's there, it's the last time we'll see him.
Specifically, it is at Kinfolk 90, which is the non-club part of Kinfolk, the bar, lounge, coffee shop part. And that's at 90 Wythe Avenue, Brooklyn, New York.
Should we buy pizzas? Nah.
Whoa, this is a grift. So yeah, there's going to be all sorts of pizzas there. I'm sure there's going to be just boxes upon boxes.
Raviolis on pizza, spaghetti on pizza, burritos on pizza. You got it.
This is the carb on carb weekend to end all carb on carb weekends.
That's right.
It's the perfect grift for, as I've heard, the perfect pod.
Cookies.
Cookies.